Hi students, welcome to yet another session of my class reading fiction. We are discussing different types of novel. Let us continue the topic. Today we are going to discuss about two types of novel. One is romance and the other one is epistolary novel. Let us discuss in detail. Yes, romance. What do you mean by the term romance? Romance means a story of chivalry and love. Yes, when we hear this term that is romance, we think that it is something associated with love or affair or relationship, etc. Yes, am I right? Yes. To some extent, the meaning is like that. It is something associated with a love, relationship or affair, etc. But in the early period, that is in the early 12th century or something like that, romance means a story of chivalry and love. Then what do you mean by this chivalry? Chivalry means noblemen, knights and horsemen that collectively called chivalry. Their act of bravery, their noble deeds, courage, duties, etc. collectively called chivalry. That is that medieval knight system, and it includes their religious, moral, social codes, etc. That is together or collectively called the term chivalry. So romance means a story of chivalry and love. That is in the early period. I already told you romance is one of the earliest types of novel. It is believed that this romance is the first type of novel. So in the early period, this romance, particular term means a story of chivalry and love. In the later years, it occurs more meaning like love affair, relationship, etc. So it is a type of fiction consists of idealized love, then chivalry, stories and legends of beauty, courage, boldness, battles and rescues of damsels in distress. Damsels means young unmarried woman. So romance means a story of chivalry and love. It is a type of fiction consists of idealized love, chivalry, stories and legends of beauty, courage, boldness, battles and rescues of damsels in distress. Then the adjective romance used to refer to the new regional languages which originated from Latin like Spanish, French, Italian and Portuguese in southern Europe. And in Spanish literature, the term has a special sense. The romance being a ballad composed in octosyllabic lines. Yes, in Spanish literature, this particular term acquired a different sense, a special sense. That is, romance being a ballad composed in octosyllabic lines. And moreover, the word romance referred to books that were translated from these regional languages into English. That is, in later years, this particular term occurred a wider meaning. That is, the word romance referred to books that were translated from these regional languages into English. In later years, it became associated with the non-didactic narratives of ideal love. Non-didactic in the sense means not intended for instruction or teaching. Such type of narratives are called non-didactic. That means it is not intended for any type of instruction or teaching or something like that. It is just like a story. So in later years, it became associated with the non-didactic narratives of ideal love and chivalric adventures such as Sir Gawain and Green Knight and Troy's Les Chevalier de la Charate, and these were called medieval or chivalric romances. These three works are important. These three works are famous early medieval or chivalric romances. That is, the best examples for medieval or chivalric romances are Sir Gawain, Green Knight and Troy's Les Chevalier de la Charate. So these three examples are important, and these were called medieval or chivalric romances and were popular in the 12th century France. These medieval romances, they featured questing knights, damsels in distress, dragons, wizards, magic spells and tournaments. These medieval romances, the storyline of these medieval romances includes questing knights. Questing in the sense means that is these knights or noblemen, their a long or arduous task or to accomplish something or to complete one prescribed task, their activities, their noble deeds, that is called questing, their intents or arduous task to accomplish something. So these medieval romances, they featured questing knights, damsels in distress, dragons, wizards, magic spells and tournaments tournaments. Then courtly manners and unrelenting. Unrelenting means constant or continuing or without showing any kindness or compassion. So courtly manners and unrelenting pursuit. Pursuit means chasing. Pursuing. So unrelenting pursuit of a lady's love are the major themes of chivalric romances. These, that is courtly manners and unrelenting pursuit of a lady's love, are considered as the major themes of chivalric romances. Then in early period, these romances were written around two major themes. Which are the two major themes here? One is regarding Matter of France. Matter of France means stories of Charlemagne and his knights. That is, in the early period, romances were written around two major themes, and the two major themes are, one is Matter of France and the other one is Matter of Britain. Matter of France means stories of Charlemagne and his knights, and Matter of Britain means King Arthur and his knights of the Round Table. So in the early period, romances were written around these two major themes or based on the stories of these two knights. One is Charlemagne and the other one is King Arthur and his knights of the Round Table. Then the most famous chivalric romances in English are Thomas Malory's Morte, Edmund Spenser's wondrous Fairy Queen, and Sir Philip Sidney's prose romance Arcadia. These three examples are important for exam. The most famous chivalric romances in English: Thomas Malory's Morte, Spenser's wondrous Fairy Queen, and Sir Philip Sidney's prose romance Arcadia. Then the medieval romance was different from the epic in its concentration on courtly love rather than on war and heroism. Yes. This medieval romance was different from epic. How it is different from epic? What do you mean by this epic? Epic means it is a long narrative poem describing or narrating the deeds and adventures of some heroic war, etc. So in this way, the medieval romance was different from the epic, because we all know that medieval romance, it is focused on chivalry and love. So epic, it concentrated on heroic deeds, war, etc. So the medieval romance was different from the epic in its concentration on courtly love rather than on war and heroism. It was different from, this medieval romance was different from the ordinary novels in its obsession with allegory and psychological exploration rather than with a social commentary. Then another related form of romance was called the quest romance. What do you mean by this quest romance? It is another related form of romance. A quest is a hero's journey that involves various trials, usually literal combat with fierce enemies, as well as the temptation to abandon the quest in favor of lower pleasures. Quest I already defined. Questing knights. Quest means it's an intense or a long or arduous journey to accomplish something or to finish a prescribed task. It means that is the making of a knight's Knight's long and intense journey or task to accomplish something. That is the meaning of the word quest or questing knights. So here a quest is a hero's journey. Yes, it is a long and arduous or intense journey that involves various trials to accomplish something or to finish a prescribed task. Usually literal combat with fierce enemies. That trials include, yes, literal combat with fierce enemies as well as the temptation to abandon the quest. Yes, in the course of their journey, there is a temptation to abandon, to give up the quest in favor of lower pleasures. This quest means it is a higher or intense task to accomplish something, but in the course of their journey, there is a temptation to abandon, to give up the quest in favor of lower pleasures, maybe for a courtly love or moving or something like that, to satisfy some low pleasures in favor of to satisfy some lower pleasures. So a quest is a hero's journey that involves various trials, usually literal combat with fierce enemies, as well as the temptation to abandon the quest in favor of lower pleasures. Such type of romance, such a related form of romance was called the quest romance. The quest classic example is that of the knightly search for the Holy Grail. Yes, there is an example for quest, and the quest classic example is that knightly search for the Holy Grail. Holy Grail means in medieval legend the cup or platter used by Christ at the Last Supper, that is Holy Grail. The cup or platter used by Christ at the Last Supper, that is called Holy Grail. I already told you their journey may be an intense one or a noble one. It is the questing, that is quest for accomplishing something or to find out something or to find a prescribed task. So quest's classic example is that of the knightly search for the Holy Grail. That is a classic example. At present, in later years, it finds that is this quest for quest, nightly search, etc. It finds expression in works like Homer's Odyssey, works of Henry Fielding, James Joyce, William Blake, etc. Then the novel and the romance share a curious relationship with the novel, originating as a rebellion against the excesses of the romances. The early period itself, the novel and the romance share a curious relationship with the novel originating as a rebellion against the excesses of the romance. The very first novel named Cervantes' Don Quixote mocked the romance. But at present, the romance is considered to be a type of novel featuring adventures in exotic places or celebrations of the pastoral life. Yes, at present, this romance is considered to be a kind of novel, and romance has come to denote a type of narrative featuring adventures in exotic places or celebrations of the pastoral life. And Morte, one theoretician, calls it a wish fulfillment dream. He calls it that is romance a wish fulfillment dream. Thus, the term romance or this genre has always been there, right from the Greek romances to contemporary novels like romances like Mills and Boone and Harlequin novels, etc. Yes, right from the Greek romances to contemporary novels. Then Shakespeare's later plays like Pericles, Cymbeline, Winter's Tale, and The Tempest have elements of romance in them. Shakespeare's later plays, that is Pericles, Cymbeline, The Winter's Tale, and The Tempest, all have elements of romance in them. Then in Don Quixote, Cervantes attempts to attain a harmony between the ideals of romance and brutal reality. Yes, one of the earliest novel named Cervantes' Don Quixote. he attempts to attain a harmony between the ideals of romance and brutal reality. And Romanticism revived the romance in the verse form. Yes. During the 19th century, the ideals of the romance were challenged by the rise of realism. In the 19th century, that is in the Victorian era, the ideals of romance were challenged by the rise of realism. And this resulted, and the realistic genre, the novel is. That is, we can trace the realistic elements, that rise of realistic elements in the ideals of romance, the 19th century novels. The idea in the, that is in the Victorian era, the ideals of romance were challenged by the rise of realism. That means some realistic portrayal of elements, some realistic elements are added into the ideals of romance. And this age also witnessed a renewed interest in anything medieval, and that resulted in the rise of the Gothic genre, that is Gothic novel, that we will discuss in the later class. This interest in the realistic elements, this age, that in 19th century, also witnessed a renewed interest in anything medieval and an increasing respect for the imagination. As a result, the features of romances continued to be popular. And in many mid-19th century works, many mid-19th century or Victorian novels such as Jane Eyre, Dombey and Son, and Silas Marner, many of the qualities of romance and realism appear alongside each other in the narrative. That is, we can trace the combination of, that is the mixing up of both elements, that is both romance and realism. In mid-19th century novels like Jane Eyre, Dombey and Son and Silas Marner, etc. That is, many of the qualities of romance and realism appear alongside in these novels. And the novel became a proponent of realism and the romance, that of a fictive reality within or beyond the real world. One of the American novelists named Nathaniel Hawthorne was in praise of the genre because it allowed freedom to the writer in pursuing the psychological aspect of its characters rather than dwelling overtly on the milieu, that means social background. Yes, one American novelist named Hawthorne, he praised this genre because this particular genre, it allowed freedom to the writer in pursuing the psychological aspect of its characters rather than concentrating on the social background or other factors. And the major criticism leveled against it, that a romance, has been that it encouraged the readers to project a value system and morals suitable for only in its fictive world. That is the only criticism against this genre, that is romance. That is, it encouraged the readers to project a value system and morals suitable only for its fictive world. Onto a real world, these might not always work. That is the only criticism against this genre. The major criticism against romance has been that it encouraged the readers to project a value system and morals suitable only for the fictive world. In the real world, it may not be work. So, romance, what do you mean by romance? Romance means it's a story of chivalry and romance, and it is considered as one of the early types of novel, that is during the 12th century, etc. But in later years, it acquired wider meaning and a wider sense. That is, yes, that is we already discussed. And at present, this romance is considered to be a type of novel featuring adventures in exotic places or celebrations of the pastoral life. So, romance, this particular genre, has always been there, right from the Greek romances to contemporary novels. And in the mid 19th century, as there we can trace, there is a mixing up of both realistic elements and the romantic ideals of romance. It is in 19th century the ideals of romance and realism, and this resulted in the form of, that is the age that 19th century witnessed a renewed interest in medieval characteristics, and that resulted in the form of a new novel, that is Gothic genre, that we will discuss in the later class. So, the mid 19th century, this age witnessed the mixing up of both elements, that we can trace the realistic aspects or the realistic elements in the ideals of romance. And the best examples are Jane Eyre, Dombey and Son, Silas Marner, etc. And the novel became a proponent of realism and the romance, that of a fictive reality within or beyond the real world. Then it became a proponent of realism as well as romance, that of a fictive reality within or beyond the real world. Then one American novelist defined it as a praise this genre because it allowed freedom to the writer in pursuing the psychological aspect of its characters, rather than focusing on the social background or other elements. And the only criticism, the major criticism against this genre, that it encourages the readers to project a value system and moral suitable for only in its fictive world. I think all of you understand what you mean by the romance, this one type of novel. Next, we are going to discuss epistolary novel. What do you mean by epistolary novel? Epistolary novel is composed entirely of letters exchanged between the characters in the novel. That is called epistolary novel. We all know that in a novel, there are so many characters in a novel. Am I right? Yes. So, in the case of epistolary novel, the communication between or the development of the plot or the storyline, that has happened with the help of letters. The epistolary novel is composed entirely of letters, that is the communication between the characters. That is letters exchanged between the characters in the novel. In short, we can say that the novel in a letter form. It can be just letters or letters with extracts from their journals included. That type of novel is called epistolary novel. That is novel in the form of letters. That is, the characters within the epistolary novel, they exchanged letters. Their communication happened through letters. Epistolary novel is composed entirely of letters exchanged between the characters in the novel. It can be just letters or letters with extracts from their journals included. In this type of works, the author often masquerades as an editor. Yes, in this type of works, that is in epistolary novels, the author often masquerades. Masquerades means pretends as an editor. The first novel in English written completely in the epistolary form was a translation from French in 1678 called Letters of a Portuguese Nun. The Letters of a Portuguese Nun was considered as the first novel in English written completely in the epistolary form, and it was a translation from French in 1678. Samuel Richardson is considered to be a master of the form. In English literature, Samuel Richardson is considered to be a master of epistolary novels. He wrote Pamela, it's 1740 publication, and Clarissa, that is 1747 to 48. So in Pamela, the letters are written by the major character recording her experiences. Pamela is a novel by Samuel Richardson. In Pamela, the letters are written by the major character recording her own experiences. But in Clarissa, a number of characters exchange letters. That is the difference between Pamela and Clarissa. Pamela, the major character, yes, wrote letters recording her own experiences, but in Clarissa, a number of characters exchange letters. And Henry Fielding parodied Richardson's epistolary technique of writing to the moment in Shamela. Shamela, another work written by another writer, contemporary writer, that is Samuel Richardson's contemporary, that is Henry Fielding. He parodied Richardson's epistolary technique of writing to the moment in Shamela. Shamela is another work by Henry Fielding, and Henry Fielding parodied Richardson's technique. But Richardson's success brought the form into vogue in the late 18th century. But his literary form, that is epistolary, that his success brought the form, that is epistolary novel, into vogue in the late 18th century. It became popular. This particular literary form, epistolary novel, became popular in the late 18th century. Epistolary novels by women were very popular in the late 18th century France. The form was favored by the authors because it combined simple direct language along with an opportunity to explore the emotions of characters. That is the point here. Why it is accepted by everyone, this epistolary novel, this particular literary form. Yes. The form was favored by the authors. Authors, yes, at that time, at that period, the writers accepted this particular literary form because it combined simple direct language along with an opportunity to explore the emotions of characters. Yes, I already told you in Pamela, the letters are written by the major character and recording her own experiences. That means expression of one's personal emotions, experiences, etc. So authors accepted this literary form because it combined simple direct language along with an opportunity to explore the emotions of characters. Through letters, these characters expresses their own personal emotions and experiences. So authors accepted this literary form. Authors like Smollett, Fanny Burney and Jane Austen experimented with this particular literary form. William Golding's Rites of Passage provided a variation in the form of the epistolary novel. Then Dracula by Bram Stoker incorporated both letters and diary entries. Yes, in later period, Dracula, a novel by Bram Stoker, incorporated both letters and diary entries. That is, incorporated both letters and diary entries. There is a advanced form of this literary form. Recently, that is at present, the form has been revised so that part of a novel is written in the form of letters. At present, this literary form is revised. The form has been revised so that part of a novel is written in the form of letters. Yes, only a part of a novel is written in the form of novel, not fully like in the earlier period. And the best example is Alice Walker's Color Purple. That is, a part of a novel is in the form of letters. Part of a novel is written in the form of letters. Best example is Alice Walker's Color Purple is a 1982 book. I think all of you understand this epistolary novel. It is easy to understand. That is a novel composed entirely, that is, epistolary novel is composed entirely of letters exchanged between the characters in the novel. It can be just letters or letters with extracts from their journals include. That is in the late 18th century. But at present, In the recently the form has been revived, so that part of a novel is written in the form of letters, and some writers included both letters and diary entries in their works. That is a development that has happened to this particular literary form. So I think all of you understand this session. That is, we discussed romance and epistolary novels. So there is a homework for you. Write a note on epistolary novel and romance. Write your homework and send back to me. Thank you. Have a nice day. See you again.